Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English. Today is 22nd of September and we are going to discuss important news and articles from our favorite Indian Express. But there's something different about today's session. Any idea? What is the difference between Saturday session and today's session? Yes, the difference is 2 p.m. Now earlier we used to have sessions at 11 a.m. But because of my professional obligations, because I'm also moving on to current affairs sessions in the paid classes, okay. So because of that, I had to schedule our daily sessions from today onwards at 2 p.m. right. So this will be the new normal. Every day at 2 p.m. you'll witness this live event. That is, we are going to discuss important Indian Express articles, right. We'll start off our today's discussion by a very important development that happened over the weekend. That US government made getting of H1B visas very difficult. US government said that the companies who are going to sponsor your H1B visa, they will have to pay 100,000 US dollar as a fees for that visa. So it automatically makes getting of visa very difficult because companies who rather pay about $100,000 to their employees as salary, they will have to shell out $100,000 more. So this is an economic disincentive for H1B visas. So this is a very big development as far as Indian interest is concerned, because you need to understand more than 70% of the beneficiaries of H1B visas were Indians. So this creation of visa barrier affects India's interest, and this is also a wake-up call for Indian government in general, because going forward many countries on which we depend, including Russia, including US and including China, their policy moves there might harm our interests. So what is this bigger development that we'll cover? We'll also cover our dependency on different major economies in the world and how their policy changes can affect us. So this is how we are going to cover in our first discussion. Now this is something relevant for GS paper 2 perspective, but also from GS paper 3 perspective, because this deals with matters relating to IR as well as matters relating to economy. In the second article, we are going to cover about a body known as Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister of India. What kind of body is this, what it does, and we'll also analyze the statement made by the chairperson of the Economic Advisory Council, that he stated that investment and exports are very essential for long-term Indian economic growth. So that we are going to understand in our today's discussion. This is a development relevant again from Indian economy. So the relevant paper here becomes GS paper 3. In the third article, we are going to cover an article given in the explain section of the Indian Express saying that the problem with low inflation. Any idea why low inflation is a problem? Because for consumers like you and I, low inflation is a very good news, because the things that we are going to buy in the market, don't you think they'll be available at a much cheaper rate? So that is the good aspects about the low inflation. But what are the challenges of low inflation? That we are going to understand in our today's discussion, particularly from the perspective of government's budgeting. Okay. So this is an article relevant from GS paper 3. So today's discussion is very economy heavy. Good news for me. Okay. So this is the article for GS paper 3. In the fourth article, the article that we haven't been able to cover since our last two discussion, don't worry, I will 100% cover this EU's new strategy document. Now this EU's new strategy document has been published with respect to its relations with India. Now India's relationship with EU becomes very important. First of all, India and EU put together are facing challenges in US. They are also facing challenges in navigating their relationship with China. So in this regard, strengthening of India and EU's relations becomes very important. Similarly, as our goods are facing increased tariffs in US, our second largest export market is the European Union. So there we can diversify our trade away from US and reduce the risks that is associated to Indian trade vis-a-vis Donald Trump's policy of tariffization. So this is again important from GS paper 2, that is the IR portion of the syllabus, and also economy portion of the syllabus, that is GS paper 3. Right. And in the fifth article, we are going to cover Anand Marriage Act. Anand Marriage Act is an act which regulates the marriage of people belonging to Sikh religion. Right. Now you have to understand marriage, succession, inheritance, etc. These are personal matters, and in India these personal matters are regulated religious wise. So for example, Hindus, their marriages, succession, etc. they are regulated by Hindu Marriages Act. Similarly, Muslims have their different laws, and similarly Sikhs have their different laws. But why is this act in news? What are the challenges as far as implementation of this act is concerned, that we are going to discuss in our today's discussion. Now, last article is important from GS paper 1, that is Indian society, how relationships are managed in Indian society, and also it deals with a legal matter, that is marriage, etc. So we are going to discuss this article from GS paper 1 and 2, that is polity perspective. Okay, so these are the 5 articles we will cover in our today's discussion. Now, good afternoon, Baga, Gagan, Arya, Niranjan, Mahamim and Benzir, Reshma, Yashi, Rajiv, Ravi, good afternoon. Yashi, I am good. How are you doing? Ashon, after a long time, Ashon. NM, Kharbudon, good afternoon, everyone. How is everyone doing? Well, you know, one funny thing happened today. When coming to the office today here in Delhi, I was listening to an A.R. Rahman song, the song which has been picturized in a very beautiful Himachal Pradesh as well as Kashmir climate, the climate of snow. And as I was walking from the metro station to the office, the heat outside was very intense. So I was feeling this kind of a difference. In my earphones, the songs that were playing helped me picturize a very beautiful location, a very cold location, and on the outside the reality was very hot, right? So this funny thing happened. Now let us come back to our today's discussion. The articles will be available on this particular Telegram channel known as ATS Live. You can download these notes as soon as the class ends. Few minutes after the class, I will upload the notes. Okay. Now let us start with the first article. This article appeared in the Indian Express newspaper. Both of them are in the editorial sections. These 2 articles talks about one thing, that since US has revoked the benefits offered to many immigrants including Indians, that was H1B visa. So this creates a situation for the government where its interest or Indian people or India's economic interest itself is harmed. So how can government navigate this? What are the challenges? What are the challenges that India might face with respect to Russia and China? That we are going to discuss in our today's discussion. Okay. Well, I will cover an article on Zubin Garg. Well, I was reading about Zubin Garg. First of all, tell me what is the current pronunciation of Zubin Garg? Is it Zubin or Jubin? And also, as I was reading about Zubin Garg, I realized we in North India, we majorly know him because of his song Ya Ali, which was in movie Gangster. But in reality, when you realize the discography of Zubin Garg, he had sung more than 38,000 songs in as many as 40 languages, which is not a rookie number at all. So I was studying a lot about Zubin Garg and what made him so popular, what made him so famous in the state of Assam. So I decided I will do such kind of a video because this kind of an information is very important as far as your general awareness about Assam is concerned, right? Zubin Garg. Okay, I will do that video today itself. No need to worry, okay? Please let me know how did you find that video? Did you like it or did I miss out on something? Okay, so let us start with our today's discussion. We'll talk about Zubin Garg in a separate video. Now, what is India's foreign policy like? What is the key fulcrum or key pillar of India's foreign policy? It is strategic autonomy. Now, India, as far as legality is concerned, is not an ally to either US and it is not an ally of Russia or it is not an ally of China. So India follows the principle of strategic autonomy, that we will engage with whatsoever country we want for our benefits, and at the same time we will have the ability to engage with the other parties of the conflict also. So from that perspective, you can say India has good relations with Israel, India has good relations with Palestine, India has good relations with Israel, India has good relations with Iran, India has good relations with US, India also has good relations with Russia. So having a foreign policy like strategic autonomy, it gives us the freedom to have a good relations with both of the parties to conflict. And India's original intention behind such kind of a foreign policy is that we are a developing country. We can't be seen belonging to one camp or one side. We will engage with each and every country who we feel are good for our interest, right? So this is India's main pillar of foreign policy. Now, India projects itself as pursuing strategic autonomy, and this in reality can be seen as multi-alignment. India is not aligned to West, India is not aligned to East, India is aligned to both of them, and this is called as multi-alignment, right? But in reality, this kind of a foreign policy also faces certain challenge. First of all, we are increasingly getting dependent on many countries. For example, due to freedom of trade and due to global value chains, we still depend on China. We continue to depend on China even when we were having very bad relations after Galwan conflict, right? Similarly, we buy a lot of weapon systems, we buy crude oil from Russia, and at the same time, India's diaspora in US is of huge number. India's businesses, India's government interacts very closely with US. So when you can engage with multiple parties, don't you think in terms of conflict you will also face certain kind of resistance, which we are actually facing resistance? What was the main reason of Trump increasing tariffs on Indian product? That India was buying crude oil from Russia, and this put India's relationship with US in danger. So this is a kind of reality that we were going to face. Now the thing is that we can't abandon this kind of a policy just because we are facing challenges from other countries. We will have to identify the problems and then we'll have to solve these problems individually while maintaining multi-alignment at the same time. So this is our original intention. Now what happens when we are engaging with multiple sides of a conflict is that our foreign policy space or our ability to navigate our foreign policy, it becomes quite difficult, it becomes quite constrained, so that we don't want to antagonize one party and maintain a relationship with other party, right? So this requires very finesse, this requires a very high degree of maturity, and this is what India's foreign policy has. So we'll study how India foreign policy is facing problems, and then we'll also understand what may be the desired solutions in this regard, okay? Now first let us understand India's dependence on China. Now, India depends on China a lot, for example, for securing manufacturing goods, consumer items, white goods, computers, mobile phone components. India is a major assembler of mobile phones. So, where do you think majority of the components which we assemble in India comes from? It comes from China. Similarly, India has a very big pharmaceutical industry, but the ingredients that you require to make drugs and medicines, these are called as active pharmaceutical ingredients and chemicals. These are sourced mainly from China, and this cheap raw material gives our material or our generic industry or our medicines an edge in Western markets. Similarly, commodities like rare earth minerals, lithium, polysilicon wafer, solar cells, these are also imported from China, and that is why this helps us in deploying large amount of solar power energy in India. Similarly, let's talk about fertilizers and industrial machinery. Now, India is dependent on China for heavy imports of fertilizers, particularly diammonium phosphate, and because of the shortage of diammonium phosphate, don't you think the prices of diammonium phosphate increased in India in last year? Right, this happened. Similarly, for semiconductors, bulk of imports, be it components which are used for electronics industry, components which are used in automobile sector for semiconductors, we are still dependent on China. And when COVID-19 restrictions were imposed, our imports of semiconductors coming from China affected, thereby delaying many important projects or products that were going to come in the market. So this is how our dependence on China can make it risky for India. Right. Similarly, we continue to depend on Russia. Now, earlier India was a major importer of Russian made defense equipments. Now we have reduced our dependence on Russia, but even today, most of our defense equipments like T-90 Bhishma tank, Sukhoi 30 MKI weapon systems, S-400 air defense systems, all of them are Russian origin. Now, going forward, we are going to buy less from Russia, that is true. But what about maintaining the existing military platforms? You need spare parts, you need engineers, you need expertise, you need raw materials, right? So for that, even today, 60 to 70% of our key systems are dependent on Russian supplies. Similarly, India had deep linkages with Russia in terms of comfort levels. There are many transformative technologies that are continued to be transferred to India by Russia, and for that purpose we can't still move away from Russia. Now India at present time requires a 5th generation aircraft. India does not have its own capability to make a 5th generation aircraft. Which country has offered us a 5th generation aircraft? Russia. They have offered us the 5th generation Sukhoi 57 aircrafts, right? So this deep linkages or the deep comfort level that Indian government has with Russia allows us to continue our relationship with Russia and makes for us diversification away from Russia much more difficult. Similarly, since Russia-Ukraine war in 2022, India's imports of Russian origin crude oil has increased. Before war, India was importing about 4% of total crude oil from Russia. Now this has increased to 40%. So our 40% of crude oil which we are importing today comes from Russia. And this has increased our dependence on Russia for crude oil as well. Going today, most of our refineries, including the Jamnagar refinery of Reliance Industries, refineries of many PSUs, they are depending on cheap Russian oil, and their technologies have been modified so as to manufacture petroleum products using Russian crude oil. So this has highlighted a recent increase in dependency on Russia. Earlier it was relating to defense equipments. Now it also includes oil imports, right? Similarly, how are we dependent on United States? Now, as far as India's export market is concerned, US is India's largest export market. Not just going or delivering goods and services, India also relies on US's market to absorb much amount of labor, particularly highly skilled labor. How many of your friends have you seen have gone to US just to get higher salaries? Especially when coming from engineering background, people often migrate to US because the salaries offered to software professionals in US are many times higher than India. So this creates a very pull factor as far as US is concerned for India's high skilled labor, and as a result more than 70% of the H1B visas that were issued by US government, they were offered to Indians, and US continues to be top destination for Indian students, and many Indian students, they also go to US so that ultimately they will settle down there by obtaining what is known as green card, right? Green card does not give you a citizenship, but green card in US gives you the right to staying in US for a permanent, or it gives you a permanent residency in US, right? So your hassle as far as securing visa is concerned goes away as soon as you get green card, right? Similarly, since past few decades, India is also dependent on US for getting many important military platforms, be it Chinook helicopters, Apache helicopters, Predator drones. We are dependent on US, right? Going forward, US is also going to offer its engines which will power the next generation of Tejas aircrafts, helicopters, reconnaissance aircraft like P-8I aircrafts of Navy. All of these are American origin. So our dependence on America for arms and ammunition has increased in recent time. Similarly, there was also another strategic reason why we improved our relationship with US, and this was to counter or check the rise of China, and that is how US's good relationship with us helps us to navigate the minefield that is India's relationship with China. So this is the reason why our dependence on United States economy, its government, its military has increased in recent times. Okay, now what are the implications of this dependence, right? First of all, our dependence on China. Now, as we are dependent on China for securing raw materials for most of the products that we manufacture here, this makes us vulnerable to supply chain disruption, and this actually was in reality during COVID-19 pandemic, right? As far as imports of semiconductors is concerned, it was affected due to COVID-19 restrictions. Now, imports of fertilizers are coming less from China, and that is why the prices of diammonium phosphate has increased in India. And therefore, any supply chain disruption in China has the potential to cripple India's economy. As we are dependent on Chinese-made solar cells, it has potential to cripple our energy transition efforts. Any idea what is energy transition efforts of the government? Any idea? No, we are not following non-alignment now. Non-alignment was a policy of Nehru's era, but after economic reforms in early 1990s, in 1991, we are following what is known as multi-alignment. Earlier, we were not aligned to anyone. Now, we are aligned to almost everyone. Understood? There is a very fine line between, yes, for moving a greener and sustainable sourcing. We want to move away from thermal based power generation to a more cleaner wind and solar based power generation. And this is what energy transition means. Now, to increase our deployment of solar and wind energy, don't you think we need more turbines, we need more solar cells? And that is why we are dependent to China. And if China, for example, stops exporting solar cells to us, our green transition efforts will be undermined. Similarly, due to sanctions, our relationship with Russia is suffering. Otherwise we would have imported a lot more defense equipments, we would have imported a lot more crude oil, but our crude oil imports, our other economic transactions are subjected to sanctions imposed on Russia by the Western countries. Similarly, there is also one big cause of concern, that is increased interaction between Russia, China and Pakistan, known as creation of Pakistan Axis. Now, earlier India was entirely dependent on Russia to check China's policies in United States Security Council. But suppose if interaction between Russia and China increases, interaction between Russia and Pakistan increases, our dependence on Russia would be suffering. And this would also create problems in future. What if there is a disruption in supply of spare parts, disruption in supply of equipments which are used in our military, right? So this is a problem. Similarly, what is the biggest problem we are facing with US? That is rising protectionism by the US economy. US economy has started imposing tariffs on the goods which are imported in US. Similarly, it has imposed visa restrictions now by making getting the H1B visas more difficult, and it directly impacts Indian economy, particularly which sectors? IT sector, remittances, because India's diaspora and India's remittances, which amounts to more than $120 billion, about 22 to 23% of it comes from US itself, right? So suppose if less Indians are present in US, don't you think the amount of remittances that they will send back to India would reduce? Similarly, due to increased geopolitical vulnerability and increased conflict between these three parties individually or between two and one, what we have faced is that we have faced reduced policy space. Now suppose if these three countries were very good friends with each other, we would have freely traded with anyone and no other party would have a problem. But since US has a problem with us importing more goods from Russia, don't you think it reduces the amount of freedom that India's policymakers has? So that is why it has reduced policy space for Indian government and its officials. So this is the problem that we are facing. Now, what will be the impact of US visa fees hike? That is the fees hike of the H1B visas. Now, it directly targets India's IT professionals. Now, who are the most famous tech executives in US? Can anyone name them? Yes, Rishi, I communicated this multiple times in our Saturday session, also in my Telegram group also. Good afternoon, Rishi. Now, can anyone tell me who are the most famous tech executives in US? Yes. Sundar Pichai is CEO of which organization? Anyone else? Musk and Zuckerberg नहीं आएगा यहाँ पे. Yes, Satya Nadella. Has anyone heard of this person? Shantanu Narayan. Yes, Satya Nadella is the CEO of Alphabet, which is the parent organization of Google. Satya Nadella is CEO of Microsoft. Shantanu Narayan is the CEO of Adobe, and all of these people are Indian origin people who at one point of time they went to US and they got similar kind of an H1B visa, right? So when Indian executive, all these three people have been educated in India. When Indian educated students, they migrate to US and they rise in the ranks in big tech companies, don't you think it creates a very threatening image for America, that when an Indian origin person can come to us, work hard and become a CEO, don't you think it would create a negative impact of or negative image of Indians, that they are taking our jobs, and because of that the US has made getting of visas difficult, and it directly impacts India's IT professionals. What about future Satya Nadellas? What about future Sundar Pichais? What about future Shantanu Narayanan, right? Now, this kind of a measure not just affects Indians, it also affects US companies. Why are US companies hiring Indians? Because they don't have equally talented people in US who are US citizens, right? So that is why they are hiring from other countries. And when these people who are arriving in their country, automatically they will work harder than the natives because they are not living in their home. They are under constant threat of getting fired from their jobs, and they would do everything that is possible, do each and every hard work, make better innovation, and that is how US companies have gotten so big, because they have harnessed the global talent, they've harnessed the best talent across the world, and that is why this kind of a policy measure would also affect big tech companies, not just India. Similarly, it can also create problems for us. Why? I told you India is world's largest recipient of remittances, and US accounts for 27.7% of total remittances received in the country. So suppose in future if Indian people would lose jobs, don't you think the amount of remittances that India gets from US would reduce? Any idea what is a remittance I'm talking about? Appointed by Elon Musk, who? Neil Mohan. Okay. Neil Mohan is the head of YouTube. He reports to Sundar Pichai. So Sundar Pichai is boss of Neil Mohan. Now what makes remittance different than say salaries? Now suppose Baga, let me give you a very clear cut definition of remittance. Suppose I'm an Indian person and StudyIQ sends me to US to teach their civil service aspirants, but they send me only for 3 months. Now the salary that I might be getting from StudyIQ for my work in US, or suppose the US people are paying me certain money in US, and if I suppose send it to my father in India, would it constitute remittance? Anyone? Let me repeat my example. Suppose I am an Indian and I go to US to teach their civil service aspirants. Now suppose I stay there for 3 months and I get money because the students are paying me. And if I send back that money to my father in India, would that constitute a remittance? It won't constitute as a remittance. It is my income that I am getting as a part of my service, and I am a non-resident of US, right? I am a resident of India who has gone there temporarily. So suppose if a TCS engineer goes for a project in Silicon Valley for 2 months, so whatever money he or she might be getting, and if they are sending it back to their parents in India, that is not a remittances. That comes as a part of income. Right? Remittance is something that I send without any reason. Suppose if an American citizen of Indian origin, or even if an American citizen of American origin, they are sending money to India for any purpose not related to economic transactions, right? So suppose Satya Nadella is sending 20 crore rupees to their parents in Chennai. That is a remittance, because first of all, Satya Nadella is a resident of US, not India. Second is that Satya Nadella is sending the money not in exchange of any goods and services he or she might be getting. Understood? So this is the difference between remittance and an income. Got this now? Now this is not entirely a negative development. This can also be a positive development. You know why? Because most of the people who go to work to US, they are going there just because they are highly skilled. Now US company obviously to function would want services of such highly skilled personnel and labor. So what they can alternatively do is that they can set up global capability centers in India or in countries like Canada and China. So suppose if such centers are established in India, don't you think it would increasingly employ just the Indian people? Their centers would be operating at a much cheaper cost in India as compared to US. So it will also mean that more jobs will be created in such centers. And when such high capability work is being undertaken in India, don't you think it would have a positive impact on Indian economy. Suppose people who are working in global capability centers of foreign companies in India, if they change and switch their jobs to an Indian company, their expertise would be rubbed off on Indian company. They would get a higher technological impact. Similarly, it will also create an opportunity to build domestic innovation hubs similar to Silicon Valley. Most of the Indian companies, they set up a different office in Silicon Valley because innovation was happening there. But if it can't happen there because of visa restrictions, don't you think similar kind of R&D funding would be diversified or diverted back to Indian R&D centers? So this would increase the overall innovation level of India's economy also. So this development is not entirely negative. In short term it is negative, but in long term when you see, it has a positive impact on India. It would allow India to become more Atmanirbhar, both more self-reliant. Understood? Baga, I will cover it differently in the economy lectures that I take, right? Don't worry. I will get to it in a much more detailed and a much more structured manner. Okay. Now, remittance, what makes a transaction remittance? Because I'm sending money to my parents without any expectation of that money being beneficial for me, right? But suppose if I'm giving a service, so the money that I get in return of that service, that is my income. But remittance is something I send it for free. For example, grants, gifts, donations, right? These are examples of remittances. Got this now? Baga, I will cover it in detail, don't worry. Now, what are the lessons and road ahead for us? First of all, to develop and to harness the capability of people who might be returning from US, we need to undertake manufacturing revolution. First of all, India must boost domestic production, and therefore it will reduce our overall dependence on imports for essential commodities, right? So therefore we will be reducing our dependence on countries like China. Similarly, we also need diversification. We need suppliers of energy, so we need to diversify again away from Russia. We need to diversify to other countries for sourcing key inputs like APIs, rare earth elements, and even we need to diversify to export destinations. Now, why is our trade in US facing problems? Because US is India's largest export market, right? Now, to reduce our impact of US policies, we can diversify our exports to European Union countries, we can diversify our exports to African countries, we can diversify our exports to ASEAN countries like. So that is how we will try to put eggs in many baskets, not just in few baskets. Also, we need to create a resilient supply chain. We need to first of all bring strategic reserves, incentivize local R&D and production. Similarly, we also need a human capital strategy. Why have many high-skilled people emigrated away from India to US? Because good quality jobs were not available. And to retain these kind of talents, we need good quality jobs to be available in India, so that when they are making good money in India, why would they go to US or UK, right? Similarly, we also need to recalibrate our foreign policy. We need to balance ties with each and everyone, that is given, but we also need to focus on self-reliance. Our good relations with other countries can't come at a cost of us sacrificing our Atmanirbharta, right? So this is what we can do in order to diversify and navigate these important problems. Now let's see how many of you are able to answer this question. गौरव आजकल बहुत इरेगुलर हो गया हो, क्या प्रॉब्लम है? Any idea what this currency crisis means? Can anyone tell me what is currency crisis? Nope. Now to pay for our exports, can we pay for our exports using rupees? No, not value. That is availability. Availability of dollars or any foreign currency for that matter, not just dollars. Now to pay for our exports, we need to pay in foreign currencies. Can RBI print foreign currencies? Can RBI print foreign currency? No. So how do we get foreign currency? The only way where we can get foreign currency is by selling our products in foreign markets and getting foreign currency in return. And to pay for our imports, we also need to pay in foreign currencies. So we need to ensure that we have adequate amount of foreign currency so that we are able to pay for our imports, right? So this is what is known as currency risk. Currency risk is a situation where we don't have enough amount of foreign currency to pay for our imports, and this crisis is also known as balance of payment crisis, which is faced by countries like Pakistan and Sri Lanka, which was faced by India back in 1991. So our earnings in IT sector increases the availability of dollar in India. Similarly, remittances which Indian people send to us, they send in their respective countries. So it increases the availability of dollars and foreign currencies in India, right? So these are examples of how we can reduce the risk of currency by getting more and more foreign currency by exporting products, right? Understood? So this is how, or what is foreign currency. So 1 and 3 is the right answer, obviously. Second does not have an impact on currency crisis. So 1 and 3 is the right answer. Got this now? Now this question. Dheeraj, have you gotten any benefits from the government yet? धीरज, सरकार आपको कौन से करेंसी में पैसा देती है? धीरज सैनी फ्रॉम बक्सर बिहार, आंसर दो. वेल, इतना आगे का नहीं सोचना होता है, वो तो मैं भी लिंक कर दूंगा एक टॉपिक को दूसरे टॉपिक से. इट क्रिएट्स डिमांड इन इंडियन इकोनॉमी. नाउ इसका आंसर दो. सो रुपीज का पेमेंट हो तो फॉरेन करेंसी कहां से आया उसमें? नाउ व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन कैपिटल अकाउंट and current account in BOP? Any idea? Transactions which are short term in nature, they are included in current account. Similarly, transactions which include transferring of investments, those are included in capital account. So for example, FDI, FPI, external commercial borrowings, loans that we take from external agencies, all of them are included in capital account. Wherein trade in goods and services, income that Indians make abroad, transfers like remittances, these are covered in current account. So what includes in capital account? Foreign loans, FDI, portfolio investment. Remittance is a form of transfer. It is a part of current account. So private remittance is not a right answer. So 1, 2 and 4, option B is your right answer. Got this? Now, private companies have capital, so they must invest in India's growth, says Economic Advisory Council's head S. Mahindra Dev. Now, any idea how investments and exports will drive growth? Any idea? Can you tell me how investments drive what is known as virtuous cycle? We have covered this in our discussion. Any idea? Now, when government or private company increase their investment, it creates more capacity. And when it creates more capacity, to harness this capacity, don't you think you required more labor? And when more labor are hired, it leads to good employment levels. And when employment level increases, people's disposable income increases. And when disposable income increases, don't you think it would lead to higher demand of goods and services, which would again lead to more investment? So this is what is called as virtuous cycle. Got this? So this is what has been highlighted by Economic Advisory Council's head, which is the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. So let us understand what is Economic Advisory Council. Now, Economic Advisory Council is a specific body constituted which would give advice to government in general and Prime Minister of India in particular. Now, what is more important about this is the kind of body this is. This is first of all not a constitutional body at all, neither this is a statutory body. And it is also not a permanent body in nature. So, this is basically an independent body not belonging to any ministry of the government, and it is being constituted specifically to give economic advice to Prime Minister of India. Now, it includes a chairperson who is the person who made the statement, S. Mahindra Dev. Similarly, it also includes many full-time and some part-time members. So, this is a normal or kind of an informal body who advises to Prime Minister. Okay. Now, what this body does, this is also very important. First of all, this body would analyze any issue which might be economic or otherwise based on the reference given to it by the Prime Minister of India, and then they'll have to give advice to them. So, suppose Prime Minister wants an advice on how to change MSP policy in India. So, he would refer this matter to Economic Advisory Council. They will do their brainstorming and they will suggest some measures to the Prime Minister of India. So, this is an expert committee at the disposal of Prime Minister to get economic advice. And sometimes you also need independent economic advice. First of all, Prime Minister can also get economic advice from Finance Ministry, Finance Minister, Finance Secretary, but you also need a separate kind of a body who will give them an independent advice. So, when he has multiple advices at his disposal, then he would be in a better position to make a good decision, right? Similarly, they also address issues of macroeconomic importance in case they are referred to them by the Prime Minister, or they can consider some important issues on their own also. That is, they have the power to consider anything suo motu also. So, either they can get certain matters to discuss given by Prime Minister, or they can take up certain matters themselves also. Also, they can attend any other task as may be desired by the Prime Minister from time to time. So, this body has a very loose kind of a term of reference, basically allows the Prime Minister to get any advice that he wants from these people. The most important thing that you will have to remember is the nature of this body. Okay, this is a unique thing about this body. Now, let's see how many of you are able to solve this question. वाई फर्स्ट एंड सेकेंड आर इनकरेक्ट ये भी बता दो. Dheeraj, are you originally from Bihar also, or are you from some other state living in Bihar? Yes, it is not a statutory body, and this presents views on addressing issues of macroeconomic importance, either on reference given to Prime Minister or also suo motu, right? So both of these statements incorrect. Option D, neither 1 nor 2 is the right answer. Good. Now let us discuss this article, or for that matter it's 248. Let us discuss European Union. Otherwise I don't want to push European Union further. This article we can take tomorrow also. Okay, agree with it? Shall we discuss European Union, because that is also important and we have been delaying it for multiple days. Okay, permanent from Buxar. Well, for the first time I am hearing someone from Bihar having a surname Saini. So let us cover this, okay? Now EU, it released India strategy document which signals a shift from viewing India as just a useful interlocutor to an indispensable partner in shaping global order. Now one thing you'll have to understand about European Union and its countries. Now for long time European Union, or the countries who are part of European Union, they had immense amount of wealth. तो ये लोगों की मेंटालिटी क्या है? राजा मेंटालिटी, राइट? सो दे आर नॉट द काइंड ऑफ पीपल वी आर. We are very hard-working people. Irrespective of the kind of social background you're born into in India, you have one notion that if I don't work hard, if I don't struggle in my life, I won't make a name for myself. This is a given fact. I am 100% sure all of you would have this kind of a thinking, because I have it. And most of the people have it in India. Because we have been born in a country which is resource deficient, our population density is very high, amount of competition in the Indian economy is very high. So we are of the opinion, irrespective of the state we come from, irrespective of the language we speak, irrespective of the religion we follow, we have one fixed thing in mind which makes us Indian. We are very hardworking in nature. We have a very never back down attitude, right? How many of you agree with this statement? How many of you agree with the statement? Well, there was this one thing that my father used to say. We come from a middle class background, right? But he used to say, पढ़ोगे नहीं ना तो कुदाल चलाना पड़ेगा. Or if you don't work hard ना, you'll have to work as a labor in future. So this is a kind of a thinking that has been ingrained in each and every child in India, right? So this is us Indians. Now let us compare the thinking of European Union. Now the people or the countries which belong or which are a part of European Union, for a long period of time, most of the countries have been quite rich. So they are comfortable, or they are living in an environment which has put them in comfortable. They have a lot of wealth, so they obviously are not very hardworking. They have gotten most of the resources possible. Few years back, 100 to 200 years back, the countries who are part of European Union, they were colonizing different parts of the world. So they have that what many people call Raja mentality, right? So because when one set of people have a kind of Raja mentality, have a kind of elitist attitude, they used to see us Indians from a perspective of very negative image. They used to discriminate against us. ये क्या बोलेंगे ऐसे करके, right? But now see how the tables have turned, or how the Michael Scott would put, how the turntables, right? Now how the tables have turned in India's favor. India is going to become one of the world's largest economy. It is still world's 4th largest economy, and European Union needs us. Why? Because European Union after World War II has been dependent on US for its reconstruction and development, for support of its economy, and for supporting it militarily also. But now, since Donald Trump, European Union has faced challenges in navigating the politics of US. So they are now referring to another major power in the world, that is India, because they need us. They need our big market. They need our expertise in handling China. They need our growing military assertiveness so as that it would protect them one way or the other in future, right? So this is how tables have turned, and that is how, or that is why European Union has brought in this new strategy document. And this comes at a time when world order is changing. First of all, Russia is becoming more and more assertive after the Ukraine war, and this directly threatens whose security interest? European Union security interest. And which country has good relations with Russia? Can anyone tell me? Which country has good relations with Russia? Which country has good relations with Russia? India. So they need our help. Now, how many of you have seen bullies in high school? There were many bullies in high school who used to twist your arm and get whatever they want. Similarly, China, just because of its economic might, just because of its production cycles, have acted as a global bully, right? And it has brought in many muscular economic policies which has affected India, European Union, US, and all the other major countries, right? Now, who has successfully dealt with bullying of China? India has stood up to bullying of China. So now European Union thought, when he can or they can improve their relations with China, so we can use their expertise, we can use their market also. And also European Union product, which are the world's two largest populous countries, China and India, right? So suppose if European Union can't send their goods to China, which is an alternative market, they can refer to India, right? Similarly, they have faced disruptions in their US alliances, and right, that is why they are trying to balance with what is happening with US with that of improving relations with India. Yes, very right, Yashi. Well, Rishi, Russia and Israel shouldn't be your favorite country. Your favorite country should be only one country. Which is that country I'm talking about, Rishi? बाकी सबको भूल जाओ. So this is why there has been a reset in India's and European Union relations. Earlier it was characterized by drift, neglect, a sense of elitism on the part of EU. Now they've become aware of the importance that India has in the global minefield, right? Now, what is the economic dimension of this issue? European Union is India's second largest commercial partner after EU, right? And similarly, the trade that happens between these two countries, there is a trade of goods of more than 120 billion euros and services 60 billion euros. So it amounts to more than 180 billion euro trade yearly. Similarly, India's share in EU trade is just, or it is less than 2.5%, which means there is a scope for growth. And whenever there is a scope for growth, it is good news for both EU and it is good news for us also. Understood? So this is one dimension of the issue, that is economic dimension. But do you think there should be only one dimension of India's relationship with EU? The answer is no, obviously, right? So another dimension, or let us focus more on the economic dimension. Now, both of these countries wanted to improve their economic relation and they started discussing how to sign free trade agreement back in 2007. But since 18 years have passed, India and European Union still does not have a free trade agreement. Why? Because although India wanted to diversify away from China's dependency and US's market dependency, and EU seeks to access India's manufacturing sector and technology hub, but still the free trade agreement has not materialized. Any idea why? Now European Union wants India to increase or reduce the tariff that India imposes on European Union products like automobiles and alcohol. And India does not like this idea. Why? Because India has a very good automobile industry, and if cheap European Union or cheaper European Union cars come to India, that would negatively impact our automobile industry. Similarly, India has a very burgeoning alcohol industry, which is not just supplying alcohol for human consumption, but it is also getting huge amount of input which we require for ethanol production, right? So India does not want to improve or ease the access to European products such as automobiles and alcohol. And what does India want from European Union? India wants easy access or easy migration policies on European Union part. Now, what is the biggest problem that European Union is facing is anti-immigration politics, right? So, European Union does not like this idea, and that is why India still has not been able to sign a free trade agreement with European Union. But now both of these countries would want a free trade agreement because of changing geopolitical and economic circumstances. And newer initiatives have also been signed between these two countries. For example, EU-India Innovation Hub, Startup Partnership, joint work in emerging technologies like AI, semiconductors, green and digital tech, even cooperation in outer space is envisaged by these two countries. So this adds to economic dimension that going forward, both of these countries want improve trade, improve interaction between companies, improve interaction between the respective businesses. But in addition to that, another pillar that is slowly emerging as a very important pillar is known as strategic and security cooperation between these two countries. Now, India has become a very big power as far as emergence of multipolars or multipoles in global economy is concerned. Now, earlier there were two poles in US and USSR. After disintegration of USSR, the world became unipolar, where US was the only superpower. But now there are many countries which are emerging. The major challenger of US is China. Similarly, Russia is rising, India is rising, many other countries are rising. So this gives an idea that world going forward would be multipolar. And therefore, European Union is acknowledging India's achievement in this regard, and that is why many areas have been planned so as to improve the defense and strategic partnership between India and European Union. First of all, improving maritime security, cooperation in defense industrial sectors, tackling emerging cyber and hybrid threats, counter-terrorism, crisis management. Terrorism is something that has been increasing in European Union countries, and which country is facing terrorism for a long time? Which country now has expertise in dealing with terrorism? India, right? So here India can share good practices with European Union. So this is how the relationship, which earlier had a major economic dimension, now it is becoming multidimensional, which includes also dimensions of security and strategy. Similarly, there is also geopolitical significance of India and EU for each other. Now, first of all, EU is framing this strategy document. If you look at the wordings, it says India's success benefits EU and EU's success benefits India, and this is actually very true. First of all, EU needs India because it will act as a counterbalance to China in the Indo-Pacific region and global economy. Many countries or many companies are following what is known as China plus one strategy, that they want to relocate some of their manufacturing base away from China, and what one option is there? India. So this is why European Union is increasing its relationship with India. Similarly, India has also emerged as a very reliable partner in technology and green transition. First of all, I told you, India is looking to move towards a more cleaner climate or more cleaner environment. That is why it is deploying more solar technology, more green hydrogen, and more wind energy, right? And this is where the European companies can play a very important role. Similarly, India is a very reliable partner as far as technology sharing is concerned. What is one big problem that companies face by sharing technologies with China? They steal the technologies. But Indians are very proud in nature. They won't steal. So that is why they are a very reliable partner. Understood? Similarly, India also needs EU. This is also very a true fact. First of all, India has a large market, or EU has a very large market. As I told you, in European Union is India's second largest trading partner. Similarly, they have a lot of money, so they can also invest some of their money in India. Also, they can provide technological help as far as India's technological needs or imperatives are concerned. And also, European Union might prove as a strategic balancer to India amid US-China rivalry and conflict that is there between Russia and European Union, Russia and Ukraine, right? So this is why both of these countries need each other. Now, what are the challenges in partnership? The first challenge in partnership that these countries are facing is Russia-Ukraine war. Now, India is continuously importing the Russian origin crude oil, and this has put India against the Western countries like US and European Union. So, first of all, this is one big problem, that is India's continuous oil imports and India's historical dependence on Russia for its defense ties, and there are very good reasons which I have already told you. Similarly, India also needs recalibration. It needs to maintain ties with Russia, but at the same time it needs to build on greater partnership, a more strategic partnership with Europe, and this is one of the biggest challenge that Indian government and India's policymakers face. Also, European Union for a long period of time has poked its nose a lot on issues of human rights. They want very stringent data regulation which is harmful for Indian IT companies. Similarly, they are imposing several tariff and non-tariff barriers like carbon border adjustment mechanism, which would harm India's exports to European Union. And because of these policies, we are also going to face problems. Similarly, FTA negotiations have stalled over tariff and non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers I have already told you, and tariff barriers we have discussed it earlier also. Similarly, India also has a protectionist tendency. Now, India's protectionist tendency means that whenever products are coming into India, India imposes tariff and increased customs duty so as to protect our domestic industry, which sometimes can be good, but sometimes can be very harmful if that becomes quite extreme. Similarly, European Union also has a very kind of regulatory rigidity, right? They don't want to reduce their regulation, and the point of being regulating or increased regulation is that whenever companies are going to set up business in those units like Indian companies, the cost of setting up of the business would increase. So this negatively impacts ease of doing business. So this is the challenges that both of these countries are facing. Now, the correct answer to this question, let me know quickly. Well, you know, the most important determinant in the world is not love, not peace, nothing. It is money. Wherever money is there, automatically your relationship will improve. If India hadn't been growing the way it is, obviously European Union won't take us seriously. Yes, this was the name of the free trade agreement that has been discussed or that has been negotiated between these two countries since 2007. This question. Now, how many of you have not liked the session? Please go ahead and like it. Well, GDPR was a data regulation policy brought by European Union in 2018. It was very popular. They demanded what was known as data localization. So option C is the right answer. Okay. Now we have 2 articles remaining. We will cover it tomorrow. Okay. And the notes will be available a bit late. I haven't got my laptop today. So I will upload it by the end of the evening, okay, about 6:30 only, after 6:37, okay, and they will be available on this channel ATS Live, okay. So we'll see each other again tomorrow. Which time? Which time we'll see each other again tomorrow? 2 p.m. Okay. So have a good day, everyone.